Okay. We are here.
Cool. Okay. So what I want to talk about is the campaigns and the flow of funds. And so this is not quite all the way done, but it's as much as I could get done while we were in meetings all day. And I think it's already at a level where I could potentially hand it off to someone to make an app if they understand the logic. But what we're talking about now is how funds get raised. So I defined this dictionary here called campaigns, and I swagged it off of the sheet that we already had. So all the min raises are what our minimum levels are, and then I picked max raises, which were just sort of like big round numbers somewhere in the 1.5 to 2 times the raises, which those numbers can be changed. But basically each tranche or each campaign in the 6 here has a name, has a number, has a name, has a minimum raise, a maximum raise, a cutoff date. Obviously we can change the cutoff dates. I just threw date times in there roughly based on the time frames in the sheet. And then an expected time, which is like how long it takes for it to happen. Think of this like metadata, and it's all captured from what we already talked about, could be changed. And so then we have, this is just the data. So you can see these are just, this is just date time objects representing the campaigns. Then I created a sort of system state, which represents basically at any time we have top level data. So which tranche is active, how much was newly raised at that point in time, and how much has been total raised to date. And then there's a sub dictionary tranches, which contains the information for each tranche. With me so far?
Yeah.
Cool. So now the idea is we can have, say, this is 3 years of fundraising. Again, the point here is that this is an input, so we can put whatever estimates for fundraise we want. I made a random number generator that will just kind of create noisy chunks of arrival funds. And then what we end up doing is iteration logic. Now, to be very clear, this workflow just says that at each point in time, new funds will arrive. So this is set up to be weeks. See what I did here? Deep time delta is weeks. And what you would do is you generate a random amount of funds that arrive that week. And the result is then you ask, okay, is the current campaign cap reached? So whichever one is currently the active campaign, you would put those funds into that campaign. And we ask if its top number is reached. So that's the cap, the bigger number. If the cap is reached, then we close that tranche and we take any overflow and start filling the next tranche. But all of the funds up to the cap are actually allocated to delivering the work associated with campaign 1. And that's that excess buffer funding that Griff wants. Then we ask us, if that answer is no, we ask, is the hard date reached? Because remember, we have a FOMO date for every tranche. And obviously with the simulation, we could generate them in advance, but in practice, we could always generate them on the fly. Say, okay, we're starting, tranche 2, and we're going to give it 2 months, blah, blah, blah. But again, there's this data that represents the hard date that we would set, and we ask, okay, is the hard date reached even if the campaign cap isn't? That's the case, then we can say, yes, it's reached. Well, did we get the minimum? If we got the minimum, then we close that campaign, and that means we have a number that's between the minimum and the maximum, and we say that campaign's done, and these are the funds for delivering that work, and we can iterate to the next campaign and start the next one at 0. If we haven't even raised the minimum, this is where we have this sort of open question of what do we do next, because it just means that our fundraising initiatives have stalled out. It doesn't mean the project is done, but it means that this procedural has sort of failed and we need a new one. Going back up to is the hard date reached? The question is, if it's not reached, then we actually just continue with the current campaign. So this is a logical expression, and I haven't filled it in here, but this block of code just needs to express that flow chart. Make sense? And then we would be able to just run an iterative loop that collected data and showed the tranches waterfalling. And so what I was proposing was, if somebody is capable of taking this and running with it, we could actually make a little toy app for people to play with, just monkeying around with the fundraising, or even just randomly generating the raises and showing the way that this works, as opposed to having a big complicated description. It's just like essentially saying, hey, play with it. Look, we're gonna collect funds according to a a stream of campaigns. And, you know, in the future, eventually we won't even need to have these campaigns be so manual, because it's actually this very same type of thing you can imagine doing for a live system where we make proposals and say, hey, we want to do X for so much money, and we actually end up using our own system. But until the system exists, we need a human process to govern the decision-making and funding allocation processes. And personally, I think that this campaign logic is actually very simple. It's just, you know, it's a lot to write in text. It might be very easy to show in pictures and in an app. And that's why I tried to get the logic actually datafied and like rough outline coded ASAP. And so then my question to you guys as a narrative group is, you know, is this simple enough that, you know, we can go ahead with, you know, something that is a multimedia as opposed to a, you know, obviously there'd be an article describing it, but like, I personally think this is not inherently complex. It's just that it's hard to explain without letting someone play with it for themselves.
Okay, yeah.
I agree, and I think visual aids could be helpful. I'm not convinced that we couldn't explain it simply, though. As an exercise, at some point, the three of us might want to experiment with trying to explain this system in 100 words or 70 words or something.
I think
if we can do it,
be
like
an aid, like if we're doing that in an article like that,
we would want all
right
of the
there
above.
is perfect,
Yeah, we would want all of the above.
Yeah, so the thing is indeed that we needed a more visual way. I was just wondering, that's my question to you as well, is like, do you think, and that's probably because I'm not an investor or whatever, but like, do people need to be able to play with it? Or could it work as a sort of animation, you know, a GIF animation that shows how this works? Could that be enough, or do people?
I think a GIF could be enough. I mean, to be very honest, what I'm suggesting is that you guys know better than me how to communicate this. I just wanted to get it formalized enough that, like, even what I managed to write here took it from story mode to concrete numbers, and maybe it's not optimally coded. I'm certainly not a expert dev, but I have in my head the logic's already very clear. So it was relatively straightforward for me to be able to sort of map it to the point where I thought that someone could make an animation, even though I didn't finish it. It's like far enough along that it seems to me anyone with some basic business logic skills could turn it into an animation.
I mean, the cool thing about this for me is that this is almost two birds with one stone. We're explaining you know, our fundraise and iteration strategy using CAD as a tool where, you know, it's not very intuitive. I wouldn't have thought, you know, we can do this in CAD. We could even say like, we are simulating and not predicting, but like estimating how this might even work, proving out the use case of CAD by defining our iteration.
And to be honest with you, I hacked it up even faster than that. I didn't even write it in CAD, though technically I could write it. If I were to write it in CAD, I would copy all the same logics into the CAD classes. And in CAD, you get A/B testing and Monte Carlo testing and all of that stuff. This is actually just a script. But it's the same thing conceptually. This is a differential equation because the logic that I described in that flowchart is the differential logic, which means that one could easily lay it into CAD. The difference is that, you know, much like using something like scikit-learn, you have to do a little extra work to use the API. Whereas because I'm familiar enough with this, I basically just straight up sat and scripted it. And you don't get the difference is that if you don't layer it into CAD, you don't get the CAD features, which is like, but it doesn't sound like we're asking for the CAD features, which are like A/B tests and sensitivity tests and the sciencey stuff. If we're just writing a GIF, then it would be faster for someone just to finish the script and generate the GIF. If we are trying to get something that really shows off the generalized differential equation as a, you know, business tool, then one could take an extra, you know, half a day and get maybe Ravi or someone who's in the CAD beta to take this logic and actually move it into the CAD API.
Right.
And probably we don't need someone to be able to play with it, and we don't need to layer it, having it into
No, I don't think
so.
I would advocate for just taking anyone who knows enough Python to take my code that I just pushed into the conviction repo, finish it, turn it into a GIF, and put it in an article.
Hey, Guy, is that something you could do? Because we just noticed you joined.
I'm not doing Python. I wish I could.
If you preferred, I mean, if you follow the logic, you could always just do it in JavaScript. There's nothing, it's all just Python code because of that's the language I write. The thing that I just went through is actually just basically a business logic script. It's instead of Excel, it's logic. If you can read Python, you could probably produce the GIF that we're talking about in JavaScript.
Yeah, I was distracted of what is the question to what to do.
Here, let me go back up this screen then and show you actually all that we're really talking about is the tranche logic. So this is a dictionary. It contains the information about our fundraising campaigns, and obviously the data is made up by us, but it's our choices. Then it has some basic dictionary state logic that basically says which campaign is active, and then has logic for waterfalling the funds. So basically, as we hit certain timeframes or caps, we would move on to the next active tranche or the next active campaign. And the whole point was actually just to generate a simple GIF that showed the way that funds raised over time would flow from the successive campaigns. So it's really just like some lightweight emulation, but with it anchored to our real choices of data. And the discussion was, if we want to be able to explain this flowchart, we could do it by showing, hey, suppose funds came in at this rate, how would they end up getting allocated? And in fact, we can, with the same script, you would be able to run different conditions, like funds happen really fast, how does it flow? Funds come slow, funds come spiky, because all you're changing in this script is this one generator, the raise generator, which I had randomized. But like we would just say, like, funds get generated, and given a sequence of fund arrivals, what does the waterfall process through our campaigns look like? Again, the point here was mostly just to get it scaffolded out quickly. I was writing it during our meetings, but I think that I already got this up to the point where the hacky logic could be translated by someone else into something visual.
Wow, I mean the hard part is obviously done. It's pretty amazing. I can do that, but somebody could. It would be really interesting to have an interactive version. I think, like, really make this into a nice thing.
What we're actually just talking about was the prioritization between sort of the first hacky prototype being a GIF, but the same code logic could quickly be made into an interactive prototype. And I personally think the best part about writing things the way that I did this is that they're input-output operators, meaning the person who's playing with it can say, well, I'm going to imagine that all the funds show up at the beginning. What happens? Or I'm going to imagine that nothing comes for 3 months and then suddenly a big burst. What happens? And you give them the answer to that using code that's deterministic, but they still get to do the non-deterministic part themselves, the what-if experiment.
It's a great thing to show off what CatCat is about, I think. And, you can expose the bare bones thing of the system. And, in my ideal world, there would be like a easy CatCat where you have those code modules as nodes, and you would just to make it like more visual,
Yeah, and this very much goes to my overall strategy with the common stack to try to make these things as accessible as possible, as opposed to having to require people to be super experts. So the more we create modules, not just modules meaning the code and the content around how to reuse it, the more value we create. And for a common stack itself, I think we just want to keep showing things off. Wherever we can do a simple thing, show it in practice, we should do it.
So the thing is, what I wanted to say before, I was getting on a tangent with the nodes, but it all comes down to visualization of the data. And this is one of the aspects where running it in a Jupyter notebook is, severely limiting the system. Like if you had a more powerful visualization.
Well, have you had a chance to look yet at and this is one of our breakout sessions, so we can talk about it later, the work that I've been doing with my team to shift beyond so there's 3 layers. There's raw data, then there's models, and then there's UIs. And so we've been using CAD in microservices, or just generally Python in microservices. So like even this I was explaining is not fully CAD-ified. It's just a script, but it could be wrapped in a microservice called from basically stick in a Docker with a JSON RPC and called from another service that actually does the visuals. And so, from an overall analytics architecture, Kai, I wanted to talk to you and SpawnNet and others, along with Max Kudinov, to make sure that we have a streamlined path of going from, data is passed to models produce more data, that data is cached or stored or otherwise returned to a back end, and that back end plots the front end, and that this type of system architecture is something we want to make really easy for people to do, because that's how you actually get to like ecosystem analytics and answer real questions, not just like getting statistics and trying to interpret them.
Sorry, can I interrupt you guys for a second?
Yeah.
So like indeed, you guys have a session scheduled for that, so that you indeed focus on that at that moment. That makes sense. We were just saying in between while you were updating Kai on what we were talking about, that what probably makes sense to us, that I think what you just showed to us, the quick script, that it makes a lot of sense to make this animation, that we possibly do not need at this point even the code behind it. We just need an animation that we can put in a post. But the fact of like having people to be able to play with it, in the future, possible also with CatCat and so on, that's probably something that you guys can discuss between you guys at a later stage, if that makes sense.
What time is your cutoff? 1 minute?
Yeah, I pretty much have to go to my next meeting, but I'm going to drop in Jeff, in your WhatsApp feed, the link. I just pushed the Python script, and even if you guys don't use a wink of the code, if you just read the dictionary, data structures, and like look at the logic in the screenshot, I think that someone could run with it to produce the GIF. If there are questions, feel free to ask me, but I'm hoping that sort of skunk works is enough to provide the knowledge that the person who would produce the GIF would actually need.
Yeah, and that's the thing. That's the inspiring thing that's super helpful that we can use for an article. So, thank you for that one.
Can you put the link? Do you have it on GitHub? Can you put the link in the cheat sheet chat so we can add it to the notes, please?
Yeah.
I put it in the Common Stack core arg now.
Okay. So we're going to continue. Z, if you got to drop off, we're going to continue on timeline and like dates for some of these things, and just kind of planning out the next couple of months. So if you got to drop, that's cool, and we'll have all these in the notes to touch.
Yeah, that sounds perfect. And I mean, realistically, I'm going to be supporting most of this effort, but not the driver. So you guys just have to tell me sort of when you need input or reviews, etc. One other note before I run is I also have a request that I have to fill out to do an interview for the Aragon Black blog, which is obviously separate from this immediate initiative, but it's still, I'll fill in the questions, and I want to try to make sure my answers are adequately aligned with our other messaging. So I will probably, Jeff, have you as a reviewer on my responses to that to make sure that we're just narratively aligned. Yeah. And then the last thing is we have a separate breakout discussion to talk about TEGG, and more broadly, we actually have a half dozen, between the two of us, I think we're getting close to like 10 different like commitments for speaking at things. So we'll definitely have to have a consolidated discussion about how the strategy and the tactics and the timelines align with our specific presentations for Berlin Blockchain Week.
For sure, yeah, that's pretty much top priority other than fundraising and communicating that. Getting all the materials ready for those presentations and aligning with you is top priority.
Cool. Well, I will let you guys get on with the timelining, and feel free to link me docs in whatever channel.
Well, the doc is in this channel in the chat. Z, I don't know if you saw it.
We'll make sure it gets into everyone's hands, everyone appropriate.
Sounds good. Cool. Appreciate it, guys.
Catch you in a few, Z.
Later.
So as far as critical dates. So all these presentations are happening right around the end of August. So all this stuff has to be done as far as the overview, iteration strategy, fundraising plan, summarize in a point form. And we need to get that done like as soon as possible because I need to get that presentation to Max because he's going to be basically, I hope, working on all those graphics that are in there.
So before yesterday, like, yeah, that's yesterday, right?
Oh, is it?
We're on the 22nd.
Oh my God, okay, well, you really gotta get this in.
So what day, like, do you want to have it wrapped up by tomorrow? What's our?
Yeah, you have to be realistic about that.
I think that's
Do
like
you want to
the
have
number one priority
I don't think that's realistic.
is these guys. Number one priority. Number two is turning that into a presentation. And then I need to record the presentation as I'm going to give it in rough form to give to Max so he can look at it and say, okay, this is what he's trying to convey. This is how the concept should be.
From when until when are you with Max?
Probably August 3rd to like, or something like that.
Okay, so as the thing I already told you a little bit, like, I would prefer that, like, that one, the overview, it's gonna be the first priority, we're almost there, that's the final check, and then it's done. And then we can start merging it into presentation.
Yeah.
I would prefer that we take a whole lot of time this week to get that presentation, and that you wait as long as possible to send it to Max.
So here's the issue. He wants 2 weeks to work on it before I get there.
Okay.
And then he wants to put in like a chunk of work ASAP. And then when I get there, it'll be like final revisions.
Okay, but like, so I wanna push back a little bit on that.
I hear you.
Because like, he doesn't need to work 2 weeks. I've also seen like how he works and all the documents he has created for the logo, which is cool. But like getting the content really right and working on what we want in there is more important than getting on the deadline of Max having to work to.
But then why can't we just like send him what we have in a couple of days and keep working on it though? I don't understand. If all he needs is a rough idea of the content that he's generating visuals for.
If he wants that,
The thing is, he's not just generating visuals, he's generating the presentations. So we send him a slide deck and he's taking that slide deck and building us a more professional looking slide deck. So I mean, we can probably do this in an iterative process. We can say, okay, here are our graphics. Here's the graphic of the build phase. Here's the graphic of the hatch phase. Here's the graphic of the open phase. Here's the graphic of this. Here's the graphic of that. Start work on those.
Starts with those, yeah.
But the thing is, he wants to see everything. He doesn't just want like a job like we gave it to Amy. He wants to know how does this system work because that's going to inform how those designs come in.
If he wants that, we can send him the overview, but it's completely interlinked. Yeah, so actually he has the information.
Yeah. So it's basically presentation as soon as possible. Obviously, we're already within like the 2 week period of when I'm going to be there, so we don't have it to 2 weeks in advance. It's unfortunate, but that is kind of and I mean, if we work together on iterating some of that stuff while I'm in Odessa, it's not a big deal. But it would be nice for them to have something down rather than me getting there and it's all blank slate. Right. So I would say this is priority number 1. Priority number 2 is the presentation.
So priority number 1, those are bullet points, or is that?
These are 3 different docs.
Yeah.
And then we need to summarize all 3 of those into one presentation. Okay. And then after that, I would say it's all these articles. Like I agree, these are really important to be putting out, but I think this is
priorities for sure. So these 3 docs are number 1.
So
then the presentation, and then
and that doc, these 3 docs is actually just finalizing. It's like
they were at 95%. Now I'd say they're back to like 80.
Yeah, like some things.
And I added in a whole bunch from our conversations from Telegram and Twitter, and there's just and we made some last minute changes like the tech whitelist to the tech token, so that all needs to be like.
What about the Q&A doc?
The FAQ.
Yeah.
That honestly, I really need help with that because I don't have those questions anymore, so it's really hard for me to like. I mean, I can fill in the answers to those questions, but the FAQ is kind of like once we have this, then we need to explain it again, question by question.
Well, that's the easy thing. It's also think about it, not only in terms of what are the most important things time sensitive wise, but like what are the things that are going to be a challenge for us to do individually so that we can maximize our time while we're here. If that article is like not something that needs to come out right now, but it's going to be a huge pain in the ass for us to put it together later, let's maybe make some time to work on it.
So even the FAQ? Well, the FAQ is actually, I think indeed, if the overview is done, and if you say that you cannot do that anymore, I am very good at doing that. And I can also just get the questions that we had in our different chats in the channel. I mean, so it's just taking them, and now we just need to copy paste what is already written. And maybe adapt to it.
Yeah.
So it's actually an easy one. So
this will have all the answers. We just then need to format it in a question answer format rather than
just like break it up, break all the content up. So that's actually something that comes out
so that it's
in easy
bite-sized paragraph form rather than a fucking chunky.
And I think it helps to define this because we're really like defining the sections, and then the FAQ can have sections. So like, you know, rather than just talking about mahoots in the middle of the FAQ, it belongs in the open phase, the hatch phase, and the open phase questions. Like, hey, I'm a community and I want to use your infrastructure. How am I going to know how to do it? Well, if you apply to this community competition and we decide that you are the community for the field test commons, we fund a mahoot or a steward or a caretaker, whatever we call it. This is still, one of those things. And this is how that's going to work. So I mean, just so the questions are in the right section.
Right.
When people ask about the vesting
guys, right? Yeah, right. We're not going to use that like in our.
I would say don't bring that up.
They get really bad press for like using animals. So we're like, we're doing it on the blockchain.
But but the thing is, like, it's a term that Griff has stuck in his head, and then John also got enthusiastic about it, and like, so Griff is harshly defending it. And
I'll talk to Griff about it, but
he knows
that.
He knows that.
But I'm gonna reiterate it to him because to me it's a big branding mistake. To me, like, we're like the child molesters of the blockchain spin. It's like not like what I mean.
Is that element plus to me also the fact that most of the people don't know the word?
And so you look it up and then you see a video of some guy whipping an elephant and you're like, wait, you're this guy? Like, what the fuck? Like, it's not.
No, we're gonna hire that guy for you.
Right, so you're gonna be paying that guy to whip the elephant.
And by the way, Griff's gonna come back, like that's gonna be part of his argument, the negative side of it as well. So yeah.
I'll talk to Griff.
But so like to get our time for like this week done. So first of all, Graf, I'm saying that. Jeff and Griff. Jeffy. Reach around Jeff. So for the timing, if we're realistically looking at those dates, the week that we have in front of us and already well filled up agenda, I think like let's try all these common moments that we have. We work first on the common strategy overview. So that's like we get again to almost 100%. And then we also, at the same time, we start the slide deck and we like start making the bullet points of what really needs to be in there and start like we did with the previous one.
I think that can be like we kind of do that at the same time. While you and I have the overview docs open, you've got a slide deck open. It's like, okay, key point, boom. We just start like at least the frame. Right. We don't have to fill it in, but like these are the sections we need to explain. These are the main points of each section.
And that's the thing, like tell us if you think that could work for you, but it's actually the way that Jeff and I have now been working in the past weeks. It's like we have all these documents that are interlinked, and we talk about one document, and then it's like it's linked to something in the other document. We jump over to that one, we jump back to the other one.
Yeah, no, that's cool.
Yeah, and so we could do this.
We can cover more ground on
it. Yeah, indeed. And like if we have these two docs and two tabs, all of us open, and like she say, now I'm gonna like focus on like I'm gonna like really try to get some of the bullet points in, and we're on the other one, and we switch and like we cross pollinate.
Right.
Now, if we do that, then we will have very productive sessions.
Right.
And the thing, and for
that, I think it's good.
Yeah, and for as soon as we get close to, I don't know, again, like 95%, or as soon as you feel comfortable, like with okay, the puzzle pieces and what's now like represented with it, etc. It's ready. Then we can, for example, have a quick call with Max and say like, hey Max, we're ready to send you, even if it's only puzzle piece 1 and 2, but this is already for you to chew on. And then now we have 4 puzzle pieces, and now you can work on this, and then actually, that's actually already a huge thing that you can do to work on for the presentation. But I'm hesitant, I do not want to send the presentation too quickly to him, because it's gonna change until, it should change as long as possible.
Yeah, so I think what he needs is a holistic understanding, which he can get from these docs. So I'll touch base with him and say, look, we need you to, like, you and your team to understand what's going on. And then we're gonna start sending you these graphics and the presentation, because these are, I mean, other than a few final iterations, which they were good, then we changed their narrative a bit, and then I'm going back in and I'm like, Pac, how do I, like, there's just so much to put into one diagram. So I really, like, we need a whiteboard session just on like that. Those final diagrams, how to visualize how that works. Turn that into, you know, sketching on the screen, and we can start sending those over to Max and being like, hey, look, I'm hoping that we can visually explain most of this project. At least have a visual explaining aid along with the text.
And for that, I think I would like to be present as well when we call with Max. I want to give him a clear briefing also. Like, he can start by reading the documents. That's amazing, and his team can as well. I think the next step can be he asks some questions to make sure that he gets it. Whatever he doesn't get, we just briefly explain. And then when we're ready, we still have to send in the puzzle pieces. We can start working on it. We brief what we want, like this needs to go in there and this and that. But we need to also set some limits, like limitations. Like, for example, we don't want to have 7 of one puzzle piece with the entire logic around it, and then 3 hours of presentation about it. I want to be clear about that because we had that a little bit last time.
And that's, I think, you're right. This is something we need to put in the scope with Magic Power. Is we are valuing your, like, iterative feedback and making it look better for sure, but we're not trying to start inventing the wheel. We've got a lot of this down. We know iterated this a bunch of times. We know, like, this is the puzzle piece. Like, some things, yes, we will need some thought and whatever into putting how it looks, but this is just the puzzle piece with $, with a light bulb, with a whatever. Like,
please make this. And make it like match with the style and the thing that you know about the logo and so on. That is the things he needs to take into account.
I mean, I'm more concerned about the, like, explaining the build, patch, open, explaining, like, visually like how the project overall works.
And I think for that it's good if we send him if he has a document, if we say, like, if he hasn't started reading, say, like, now you can read the current version because we're at 90%. And now we have a call, we set a timer on it, ask us all the questions of a noob. Like, what did you not get?
Do we think that we can get these docs in the presentation done by the end of the week?
We gotta do that ambitious. Honestly, try to shoot for one more thing that we probably don't even start on, just to prepare ourselves.
Is that, like, graphic iteration?
Okay, number 3 is graphics and the animation, right? Or is the animation part of one of these?
No, animation is actually something that we still have to figure out who's going to do it. Maybe it could also be Max.
So let me just throw this idea for the animation at you guys at least right now.
As we're talking, like, Zargum stuff
we
just came out with.
I didn't want to, like, extend that part of the conversation any longer because I feel like I'm trying to come on too long, but I just had this, like, visual concept where I was oh no.
I'm here.
So thank you guys for watching. We're gonna stop the stream now.